about anything is the one that Jim Hansen started sounding 24, 25 years ago now. And we haven't yet reacted with quite the force of those good townspeople in Lexington who got up out of bed, grabbed their muskets, and went to work, you know. But that doesn't, it's not the fault of Paul Revere in this case, it's the fault of the rest of us. I'm going to talk just very briefly, because I know we're already a little behind schedule and so on and so forth, but it's a great pleasure to be here in this beautiful cathedral too, and in part just to get to say thanks to the Orthodox Church, which has been in this work we've done around the world, one of the exemplary forces for how religious communities might go about helping. You know, when we did the first big day of action for 350.org that in 2009 that turned into what CNN called the most widespread day of political action about anything that had happened. 5,100 events in 181 countries. One of the places it was easiest to organize was across the Balkans and things, and one of the reasons was because Patriarch Bartholomew, I think perhaps with the help of some people in this room, issued a very straightforward and clear statement about the problem. He said, global warming is a sin, and 350 is an act of redemption, period, end of quote. That is, let me say this politely, that is far more useful than any number of denominational 40-page declarations about climate change. It's more useful than any number of conferences and whatever else in the end. We're now at the point, as Jim makes very clear, that action is needed now, and action is needed on a very large transformational scale. And so far, we are not stepping up to that plate, not in any part of civil society and not in our religious response to this question either. What does it mean when things go haywire, when we see floods and heat waves of the kind that we're seeing now? Well, as Jim has given you the scientific explanation, and it's pretty clear and pretty easy. Not to do the science, that you have to be as smart as Jim Hansen, but to understand the science, you do not need to be. What does it mean in theological terms? It means we're now big enough to spit in God's face, and we are so doing. We no longer have to answer the way that Job did, when God said, can you tell the proud waves where to break, and do you know where we store the thunder? And Job's answer was basically, I have no idea. And I'm sorry I troubled you, and can I sit down now? That's not our answer anymore. Our answer is we get to tell the waves where to break, and our lifestyles and our ways of acting. That's what determines increasingly where it storms and how much and what the sea is made up of. Think that the enormity of what we've accomplished, we've managed to change the chemistry of seawater to make it 30% more acid than it was when I was born. That's a pretty, we're working on a biblical scale, in other words, at this point. And what we're doing at some, I think at its root, is blaspheming in a way that people haven't figured out how to do in the past. To take the first thing that we were told to value by the Creator and devaluing it. I mean, we're running, as Jim points out when he talks about species extermination, we're running Genesis backward, okay? And what that means is that if we're serious about any of this, it's time to go to work in the deepest possible ways. And my job always is to be a bit of a provocateur and push things along, to push everybody, including myself, out of our comfort zones and into other places. And sometimes those other places aren't great fun. You know, I was last week in California and took a day and drove a long distance across the desert, over the Sierras and across the desert, to go to the Federal Correctional Institute at Hurlong in California, where Tim DeChristopher is spending 2 years as a guest of the federal government for daring to do civil disobedience in Utah around oil and gas leases. Not on as grand a scale, but the last time I was in Washington, or almost the last time, you know, I got to spend a few nights at Central Cell Block here in D.C., which, you know, it was about as much fun as it sounds like it would be, but it was important, really important for all of us to be there. And let me turn this off. And the key words for me came from Gus Speth, who was in the cell next to mine, 70 years old, one of our great environmentalists there at the first Earth Day, founded the NRCCC, did every right establishment thing you could imagine, chaired the President's Council on Environmental Quality, ran the UN Development Program, dean at Yale. We were lying there on these metal cots, they don't even give you mattresses, you know, and chained at the ankle to things and stuff. And he looked up and he said, in fact, he wrote later, he said, just one sentence. He said, I've held a lot of important positions in this town, but none of them seem as important as the one I'm in right now. And that's something to think about when one's in the pulpit or in the bishopric or in wherever it is that one is. Not that we have to go to jail every day. There are other ways to fight this fight, but sometimes we have to be willing to do those things. The analogy that Jim draws with the civil rights movement, I think, is apt and correct, and a painful one for the churches. You know, there were great church leaders, especially in the black church, but across the span of churches that distinguished themselves in the civil rights movement, but by and large our denominations followed rather than led, and often were dragged, kicking and screaming, into the modern world, and on other issues as well. This is a place where we desperately need leadership, if for no other reason than that the churches remain, religious institutions of all kinds, remain one of the few institutions in our society able to posit some reason other than accumulation for human existence, and hence potentially subversive in a moment when we need subversiveness. When our biggest problem is a kind of cementing of the conventional wisdom around the idea that all that counts is to focus forever on growing the size of the economy and not worry about what it's doing to things even more fundamental to our survival and our thriving on this planet. And it is particularly important for churches because it's always worth remembering the deep ethical dimension of the problem that we find ourselves in. The people that Jim described, who are hurt most by the changes we see around us, have done the least to cause them. If you map it and plot it on a planetary scale, it's an almost perfect inverse linear relationship between how much carbon you and your nation poured into the atmosphere and how much trouble you're in. We're all going to be in trouble eventually, and some of us already are. My home state of Vermont damn near washed away last fall when we had record rainfall. But that's nothing like what happened a few weeks later in Central America when they had record rainfall and the president of El Salvador said, we lost 15 years worth of development last night in our country. That's how many roads and bridges and things washed away. There's not enough mission trips that we can undertake, and we can't give enough money to the United Methodist Committee on Relief, and we can't, there's nothing we can do that can begin to make up for the scale of damage that this is causing. And we best get to it right away. The good news, and I will end with the good news, is that this movement is building, and building not quickly enough, but more quickly than it was. 350.org, which is, you know, myself and by now about 20 or 25 young people, all in their 20s, you know, that's the staff, but it's built this, you know, we're now active in every country on earth but North Korea. And we've been able to work with people all over the environmental community and all over many other communities to try and really get this word out. The next chance will be on May 5th when we're doing this big day around the world where we're calling it Connect the Dots Day, where all the people who already felt the sting of these unusual extremes that Jim talked about will be coming together in their particular places to say, understand that this is not a one-off tragedy, understand that we're part of a pattern, understand that you need to take it seriously, and understand that you've got to stop doing this to us. I mean, Pakistan has now had insane, off-the-charts flooding 2 years in a row. There's only so much you can do, so much you can take if you're a peasant farmer along the Indus, you know. How many times can you pick up and move for a few weeks and watch your crop get washed away and whatever else? So that'll be a good day, and it'll provide us with a set of human faces that we need to hold up in front of congregations around the world and say, these are our brothers and sisters, these are what they look like, this is what is happening to them, and this is what we are going to try and do about it. And what we're going to have to try and do about it is not change the light bulbs in the sanctuary, and not perfectly good thing to do, change the light bulbs in the sanctuary, and I trust y'all have done it. So what we're going to have to do if we actually want to do anything about this is stand up to the principalities and powers that are behind it. We're going to have to take on the ungodly power of the fossil fuel industry and their ability to work our democracy and to prevent change from happening. We're going to have to demand that, like every other business on earth, they clean up after their waste, that they pay for the damage that they do in the world around them. And when that happens, we may have, you know, when we put a price on carbon that reflects the damage it does in the atmosphere, then we may have at least pulled one of the levers that starts us in the right direction. That's a very hard thing to do. I have a stronger sense of how hard it is to do this year than I did last year, because we took on one small corner of this fight when we went after this one pipeline down out of the tar sands of Canada. And it's, you know, it was a kind of epic battle, and we've won a temporary victory, which is the only kind that environmentalists ever win, but this one may be more temporary than most. Big oil did not take kindly to the fact that President Obama delayed granting them their permit for this pipeline, and they have fought back with tens of millions of dollars in TV commercials, all of them telling falsehoods. And we may lose on Capitol Hill this week, you know. The Republicans may be joined by enough buckling Democrats to cost us even this thing. If we lose, if we win, if we lose, we've learned a lot. If we win, it's nice, but it doesn't actually get to the heart of this problem either. It's one small item checked off a very long list, and we're actually not going to win this fight one pipeline at a time and one coal mine at a time. We're going to win it if we can get to the heart of that power. But we know a lot more now than we did a year ago about what kind of tactics and sacrifice and commitment and unity and hard work it's going to take. And some of that is really, really interesting. I'll end by saying two things about this sit-in that we did outside the White House, which there are people in this room who were a huge help with. Two things that strike me as important messages going forward. One was when we called people to come. When I wrote a letter that a few other people signed, Wendell Berry and a few others, Jim signed. One of the things we said, because I thought it was important, was that young people should not have to be the cannon fodder for this thing. If you're 22 right now in our economy, an arrest record is not what you need. Okay? But one of the few privileges of growing older is, after a certain point, what the hell are they going to do to you? And so that's how it worked out. It was amazing to see. This turned into the largest civil disobedience action in 30 years in this country about any issue. 1,253 people arrested. We did not ask people, how old are you? Because that would be rude. But we said, who was president when you were born? And the two biggest cohorts came from the FDR and the Truman administrations. And on the last day, there was a man arrested. He had a sign around his neck that said, World War II veteran, handle with care. He was 86, and he'd been born in the Harding administration. Okay? So that's a pretty, given the demographics of churches in America, okay, that's a good message to take home, that simply because one's hair has thinned or turned gray, it does not excuse one. In fact, it gives one new freedom to be part of this fight, okay? To be an elder in the real sense, to demonstrate that one has learned something over time and is willing to make sacrifices for the community. The second thing we told people when we were asking them to come to this thing was that we needed them in their Sunday best. If you wanted to get arrested, we said, wear a necktie and wear a dress, okay? Not because, I mean, I live in Vermont. We don't really, neckties we can do without, it's not my thing, really. But because we needed a way to show people the important, basic, underlying truth here, which is that we are not radicals in this fight in any way, okay? All we're asking for is a planet that works a little bit like the one we were born on. Every human being, until the last 20 years, every member of human civilization anyway, had the privilege of living in the Holocene. In this period of benign climatic stability for 10,000 years that underwrote the rise of that human civilization. And we've managed to spoil that and end the Holocene and bring on something else for which we don't yet have really a name, and we don't know how far into it we're going to go. But all we're asking for is a world that looks a little like the one we were born into. That is not radical. That's, by any rational definition of the word, a conservative request. Okay? Radicals work at oil companies. Yeah. If you are willing to get up in the morning and go to work altering the chemical composition of the atmosphere, then by definition you're engaged in a more radical act than any previous human beings have thought to engage in. Okay? Now, we all are complicit in that to one degree or another because we burn coal and gas and oil too. But the difference here is that those companies and those executives of those companies are taking the money that they make, and they are the richest and most profitable enterprise on earth, and they are using it to make sure that we do not change, to buy the result in our democracy that they want. And that is what makes it, in the end, so unforgivably, well, not unforgivably, that's an untheologically sound word, makes it so dramatically wrong what it is that they're doing. And so I am aware that this is uncomfortable in every way to talk about in these terms. But I'm also pretty convinced that the time has come to talk about it in these terms and not to pretend that it will be solved easily or with resolutions or anything else. Like every other great challenge that humans have faced, it will be met, if it's going to be met, with real courage and with people willing to make real sacrifices. And in the past, in most cases, religious communities have been at the head of those fights, or at least deeply involved in them. And we need that to be the case here And maybe we need it more to be the case here than ever before, because of the fact that that all of us are in some measure complicit in this. It's not like the civil rights movement in that there is no kind of, at least within our society, group of people who are more victims of fossil fuel than its beneficiaries. At some level, all of us are its beneficiaries, and we're used to that, and our lives are, arranged around it in certain ways. And so the moral witness of the church in defense of our neighbors around the world and in defense of creation, that is of surpassing importance. And it needs to be a witness with teeth behind it. It needs to be a witness that people pay attention to because they understand that it grows out not just of our heads, but out of our hearts at the deepest place. And so I very much look forward to working with all of you. Many of you I've worked with in the past with great joy, and I look forward to doing much more of it and to seeing you wherever it is, even if it's in a cell block.